Isn't it crazy that an alliance created nearly a century ago is still the biggest in the world? Why did nearly every country in Europe join this alliance, and what makes it so special? How did it stick around all this time? I am Filip, and today we will be taking a deep dive into all of these questions, see how it all started, the evolution, important facts that you may not know, and more. So stick around till the end of the video. NATO is a military alliance formed right after World War II, yet you still hear about it today. It is without a doubt the strongest, biggest, and the most influential alliance in the whole world. But it wasn't always like this. This is where we go back in time, 75 years to be exact. We will take a look at Europe in 1949, the most important continent during the Second World War and one that suffered the most because of it. I think we all know how World War II was. It was draining for all countries, even for those who didn't participate. It lasted 6 years and it was brutal. Most of the countries here are exhausted, have damaged economies, and everything pretty much sucks if you are European. That's when the last two remaining superpowers of the world tried spreading influence on the continent. The USSR did that by basically forcing people to choose communism. I mean, what could the small and destroyed nations of Eastern Europe do? The answer is nothing. Czechoslovakia was cooked and the region transitioned to communism whether the people liked it or not. Now, if you didn't know, Germany was separated into 4 parts. This one to the US, this one to France, this one to the United Kingdom, and this one to the USSR. Seeing that the USSR influenced all of these nations, the UK, France, and the US united their territories in Germany and created the democratic West Germany to prevent further communist expansion. In addition to that, the UK, France, and the Benelux countries signed a pact to defend each other, just in case. The UK then starts secretly stalking with somebody. Someone strong and very proud of their work in World War II. This is how NATO was formed. 12 founding members. I'm also counting the colonies they have, which are a lot, but something tells me that they won't last long. Anyway, the members went to Washington DC where they signed the North Atlantic Treaty. The 2 articles that I like to point out are the following. Article 10 says that the alliance can and will expand in Europe and that any nation that can bring security to the North Atlantic area is welcome. Then Article 5 basically says, if you invade one of my allies, we all declare war on you. Pretty simple if you ask Stalin, because he understood that really well. He didn't try expanding further into NATO's territory. If you think about it, this has been the reason why NATO still exists today. The creation of NATO was the start of the Cold War. Although no one declared it, no one specified it, but it kind of goes without saying. It isn't really a war fought with tanks, soldiers, or anything like that. In fact, they don't even share a border yet. It's the constant conflict and rivalry between the United States and the USSR. Both of them had nuclear powers and were kind of scared to fight each other since it would cause the destruction of the entire world. Instead, they came up with a better idea. Make other smaller countries fight so we can get more influence and more power. One of the smaller countries affected by this was Greece. It was engulfed in civil war because of the communists who tried to overthrow the government. They were rebelling against the Greek monarchy. They were funded and supported by 2 different nations. Can you guess which ones? I'm going to give you a second to think. If you guess Turkey or Iran, you would be absolutely wrong. The ones that helped the communists the most were the USSR and Yugoslavia. Eventually, the 2 outside countries had some kind of disagreement, which led to the UK and the US helping Greece not to fall into chaos. The war ended in 1949. NATO had to take initiative, so in 1952, Greece and Turkey joined the organization. This is crucial since now NATO has a direct border with the USSR. In 1955, West Germany was allowed into NATO. This may have been the last straw for Khrushchev, the Soviet leader, as he has now created the Warsaw Pact with its goal to rival NATO. All of this only increased tensions between the two, especially in Germany, where Berlin was separated into 2 after the Second World War. All you need to know is that this is the capitalist side and this is the communist side. with the US constantly funding and supplying the western part of Berlin and the east remaining poor and undeveloped, people from the communist side started moving towards the capitalist and more developed one. It was a defeat for the Soviet Union, and of course Nikita Khrushchev couldn't take it. He came up with the best idea he could have thought of, creating a wall on the border that was dividing Berlin even more into two. Suddenly, people couldn't travel from one part of the city to another. This caused many crises and conflicts between NATO and the Soviet Union. The first one was a literal standoff in Berlin in 1961 that had every nation in the world worried that a nuclear war could start. The second one was even worse. It happened in Cuba, a communist nation right next to USA's mainland. American spies saw nuclear weapons and launchers on the island. John F. Kennedy had to deal carefully with the crisis, which put America in danger. He was completely ready to invade Cuba, and suddenly someone called. Yo, here's the deal. I don't like that you have launchers pointed at me in Turkey, so can you please remove them so we don't go to war? I will remove mine from Cuba. Kennedy responded in the next millisecond and saying yes. Even though Kennedy escaped global apocalypse, something bad happened to him. Let's just say he was driving peacefully in his beautiful convertible car and something unexpected happened. It's up to you to guess what. Eventually, after the tensions cooled down and the world could chill for a moment, NATO welcomed another member in 1982. It was Spain, who recently got rid of the dictator Francisco Franco. He died of a heart attack, I think in 1975? Hold on, let me check. Yep, I was right, he died on November 20th, 1975. Anyway, back to what I was saying, the two sides began improving relations and finally started cooperating. Why? Because Mikhail Gorbachev was elected. This guy, he was a little, how do I put this, more open-minded compared to the other Soviet leaders. He tried listening to the people and stepped towards peace with his rival. This led to the Eastern Bloc thinking that there's a possibility that finally the USSR has let its guard down. So they either became democratic peacefully or through a revolution. Then Gorbachev started negotiating with the West for a possible German unification. The talks were successful, and in 1990 NATO expanded once more with the addition of East Germany. This also meant that Berlin was unified once again and that the wall that separated hundreds of thousands of families has been finally taken down. Gorbachev didn't want the communist state to dissolve. That wasn't his goal, but he couldn't do anything about it. The USSR was falling at a fast rate. The US just stood there and watched their rival destroy themselves. Not like they did in my series, The Era of Deviation. You can check my video out once you finish this one if you'd like. You'd have it in the top right corner. Anyway, the process of dissolution began with the Union's republics leaving the USSR one by one. The first republic to declare independence was Estonia in 1988. More followed after the failed communist coup against Gorbachev. He resigned on December 25, 1991, marking the end of the Soviet Union. Even though the main rival of the alliance was gone, NATO didn't dissolve as the members would still want to cooperate in the future. This led to a big opportunity in the former Eastern Bloc, where NATO could expand further into continental Europe. Czechia, Hungary and Poland were invited to begin accession talks at the Alliance Madrid Summit in 1997, and on 12 March 1999 they became the first former members of the former Warsaw Pact to join NATO. This was the first wave of post-Cold War enlargement. Then Bulgaria, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Romania, Slovakia and Slovenia were invited to begin accession talks at the Alliance Prague Summit in 2002. On 29th of March 2004, they officially became members of the alliance, making this the largest wave of enlargement in NATO history. Also, a fact that I should have said by now is that a lot of things happened in this time period, such as something really bad in New York. You probably know what I mean. That caused attacks in Afghanistan and Iraq from the big alliance NATO, but I'm not going to get into detail in this video. In 2008, NATO announced that they would support the Georgian and Ukrainian accession to NATO. Of course, our buddy Russia didn't like that. I personally think that this started a domino effect which led to Russia invading the two nations. We'll get back to that later because in this time separate accessions were made. The first one was in 2009 when Albania and Croatia joined the organization. Montenegro soon followed in 2017, North Macedonia in 2020, Finland in 2023, and most recently Sweden joined NATO this year, reaching the present. These two nations were basically scared of Russia invading them just like they did with Ukraine. Basically, they went to the US crying and saying how bad their neighbor is, and the USA let them into their home until the neighbor stopped. Of course, that's just me oversimplifying it. Don't be mad at me, Swedish and Finnish people. But you may have noticed I didn't say anything about NATO's biggest concern right now. China. They have been developing fast economically and militarily. There are tensions still rising in Taiwan as China still claims that Taiwan is theirs. That whole conflict is a whole nother video for itself and a lot of things to talk about. Another dispute that China has created was the naval borders in the South China Sea. I've talked about it in my last video. Enough about that, let's see the current situation NATO is in right now. Of course, the big focus of the alliance currently is the war in Ukraine. Depending on the outcome, NATO could expand further. For example, if Ukraine wins, I can see them joining alongside Moldova and Georgia. After that, I don't see anyone joining. The situation is weird, I don't think they will join. They're not even independent technically. Bosnia and Herzegovina has some problems internally. I don't think they will join anytime soon. Of course, Russia is trying to prevent this from happening as they will have a very big border with NATO right here in Ukraine. That's why the war in Ukraine is still going on after 2 years. Really messy if you ask me. I hope you enjoyed this video. It was so hard for me to make. I needed to do research, to film it, to script it. I think it took me about 4 or 5 hours just to film it. I still need to edit it, so about 2 hours of that. So make sure you like, subscribe, share, and everything about that helps me and gives me motivation. Leave suggestions in the comments of what should I do next, what type of ideas do you want to see on this channel, and let's get to 10 subscribers as soon as possible. So see you in my next video.